Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. Also, feel free to give me a follow on the old TikTok at the exact same handle, pro2_ANT, pro2_ant. For the second week in a row, I'm joined by Mr. Kendall Mursky on this a little bit of a journey and a theme that we got going on, tying into last week. Last week, we went position group by position group on the Bills offense, ranking them, grading them, talking about their strengths, concerns, opportunities, depth, all that stuff. This week, we're doing the same thing, but for the defensive side of the ball. And I'm excited to have you back for the second week in a row.
Yeah, I'm excited to follow this one up. I actually think, I don't know about you, but I am kind of curious before we actually give grades and stuff. Is it just me, or did you feel like this was a lot closer when you had to rank this whole thing? Like,
I was making notes for
bottom,
what to say in the intro. My number one thing is this was much harder for me in
it was really
figuring
hard
out who goes where.
To differentiate 1 through 5. And that wasn't even our main priority with this. It's mostly just, give your grade for the position group and see where they fall 1 through 5. But I actually had to think about my grade to differentiate and not have tiebreakers and stuff like that. I felt like they were all very densely populated around the same grade, whereas the offense was a little bit different. You had a clear high end and a clear low end, and some places that fell in the middle. So I think this will be interesting. And I feel like it really falls in line with how most people feel about the defense in general, where I don't want to say it's middling, but it's dependable. It's steadily above average kind of thing.
Yes, should be. I mean, it was number one, DVOA defense last year, despite the fact that everybody still wants to poke at it and be like, yeah, well, it's because they only played these quarterbacks and teams. And then it's like DVOA corrects for those things. So that's why it's important. Where did you, for this one, because we had a couple outliers last week outliers in terms of people's thoughts and stuff. We had a couple people who commented either on Twitter or on the YouTube comments and who were like, I remember one in particular thought we were way too high in the running backs. He gave him a 1.5, which I thought was way too low. But
I was normally high on the running backs.
Yeah, but even I wasn't too far behind you. And again, I think if you look at it holistically, and see, that's what's so fun with having this conversation, because you look at it from because you're trying to balance out the whole group. So if you're taking running back, everybody's kind of steady and middling, and it's okay, but Singletary does everything above average. So it's okay. Tweak them up above average a little bit as a group. But then you've got another group like the wide receivers where it's way more top heavy from a known quantity. And then everything else you might have, a little bit. What did Amy say? Oh yeah, we did rag on you last night in the film room, Kendall. Actually, that's a good plug. You did deserve it. Last night in the Cover One film room, myself and Eric Turner, sans Mr. Kendall Mursky, because Kendall is a backstabber and didn't join us last night. But yeah, myself and Eric Turner went into some pretty awesome film on Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer talking about why they're the engine and the heartbeat of the Buffalo Bills defense, which if you haven't checked that out, you 100% should. Not now, because you're here with us, but after, as another, little follow-up. Fantastic. Oh, I forgot that. Yeah. Eric was just he probably is just sitting there eating Doritos, playing video games. Oh, man, I love how everything just comes together. It's just
everyone can find camaraderie in making me the focal point of their jokes. And I'm okay with it at the end of
whatever
the day,
brings
as long as everyone's having fun.
We live in a world where everything is so divisive.
Yes.
And everyone's just on opposite sides. Whatever we can do to bring people together.
Everyone's coming together on this one one thing. So I will
exactly
get
what it is.
it.
And if that's your cross to bear, no, you got to do your 111th. That's your cross to bear. Do your job. When it came to, the defensive rankings for this episode, where, don't give away your grades or your rankings or anything like that, but where did you find were your hardest position groups to rank? Was it towards the top? Was it towards the bottom? Or if, you want, for me, I'll give an example. I found it hard. I was trying to differentiate who I was ranking higher between the edge grouping, defensive tackles, and linebackers a little bit. That was my initial starting point. And then I found a way to wean them out where I'm comfortable. But there was a lot of things to consider for me where I found those three groups hard to figure out who was going to be where, who was above who, and why, and what number to give them.
No, perfect. That's exactly mine. I thought For me particularly, it was edge and linebacker.
Okay.
Interior defensive line was a little bit easier for me to differentiate, but it still was very close. Like I said before, densely populated in the same
That's fair.
grading ballpark. But yeah, edge and linebacker was really tough for me. I
Same.
think a lot of people, like how we were talking about running backs earlier. I think a lot of people could have the edge group really, really high because of Von Miller or how they think of the young guys in the group,
Yes.
or people could have it really, really low because of what they think about the young guys in the group.
Yes.
So I think the edge group in particular could be very, very tough. And same goes for the linebackers, because I think a lot of people could talk about Matt Milano being elite. And then, there's the divisiveness that is Tremaine Edmonds. And then there's just a lot of questions behind in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
depth. So I think the linebackers in the edge group, it was particularly tough.
Tremaine Edmonds for me is like the linchpin of the entire linebacker conversation for people, because if
Yeah.
you think he's bad, you think this linebacker group is bad. Or if you think he's
Yeah.
really good, you think this linebacker group is really good. But
Right.
we're in a similar position, and we'll obviously dive into this as we go into the linebacker grouping a bit later in this episode. But it's another year again where, actually even more so than last year, because last year you had AJ Klein as linebacker 3, and maybe he wasn't the best from an athletic standpoint anymore, but he was a known quantity to a degree, and he was a reliable vet. You don't have that anymore in this position grouping, and the linebacker grouping the last several years has been very top heavy. You've got Milano, you've got Edmonds, and everybody else has just been, well, maybe, yeah, no,
Right.
we'll see what we get. But at least, again, you had AJ Klein because you were like, he's not sexy, but he'll get the job done. You know what you're going to get. He's gone. So now it's like, okay, who's linebacker 3? Okay, is it Terrell Bernard? Awesome, fantastic. Dude hasn't played it down yet in the NFL. Like, is he serviceable? Does he have, does his skill set and traits that he exhibited at Baylor, do they translate? Like, can he stay healthy? Like, what role does he play? And then it just, he's probably maybe the most like known quantity of everybody that isn't the top 2 linebackers. And then everybody else is still like, maybe no, because there's more NFL game tape for Dodson. And Andre Smith is suspended a bit, there. But again, this all feeds into it, like questions upon questions. And yeah, compared to last week, I think it was pretty easy for us to figure out, okay, who's 1, who's 5. You and I differed on where we had the middle of the pack rank, 2 through 4, but our grades were very similar and close, and the reasoning was similar. But this week I found it, I just found it hard. Like last week, I kind of already knew going into it. I was like, here's my 1, here's my end. I knew what my grouping was. I just had to figure out the grading.
Right.
But this week I was literally, and again, especially like edge and linebacker, I was really like, how am I trying to quantify this based on our grading system of strength and depth and concerns and everything like that. And yeah, I'm very excited to have you back for this episode. This is
going to be happy to be here, man.
Yeah, just happy. I'm just here so I don't get fined. And yeah, this will be another good one. And you know what else is a good one? The sponsor of this show, One Pie Pizza. I mention it every week. Why? Because they're the sponsor too. I might do it even if they weren't. And again, why? Because they're the best pizza in Buffalo, hands down. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni, a fantastic cheese to sauce ratio. I'm all about that. I don't want to bite into a piece and the cheese comes off. I don't want to see it missing in certain spots. They're on point with everything. They make their own homemade blue cheese. They make a really great potato salad. I hate potato salad. I eat their potato salad because it's that good. They're great people making great food and a great product. They just got finished donating a portion of their proceeds last week for several days to the Alzheimer's Foundation. And I mention all the time they've done donations and drives during October and those months to help knock out cancer in partnership with Roswell. They do Toys for Tots and just a whole bunch of different drives. They're very active in the community and with like humanity and people. So anything you do to support them, you're getting yourself some delicious pizza and you're treating your taste buds, but you're also doing something good for the community because that's what they're about. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether you're here on YouTube, whether you are listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. And for those of you here live with us now, drop a like on this video, please and thank you. It goes a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you are listening later and not watching live, drop a like here on this video on YouTube. If you're listening on any of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe. Also subscribe on YouTube, all of that stuff. Please and thank you. It makes Kendall really sad when people don't drop likes and people don't leave reviews.
That's why I don't come to film room.
That's why he gets so emotional. He just locks himself. He takes his takes his little blankie like Linus from Charlie Brown. He takes it. He just shuts himself in his room. He doesn't come out for days. Just Doritos in his blanket and Madden cast. Just sad. Don't make Kendall sad. Don't make Kendall sad. Don't do that to him. Go get yourself some one pie pizza. And now, let's dive right into it. Into ranking the Bills position groups. We're going to start with safety. And for those of you who weren't here last week or who were, but maybe, a little murky on the rules, here's what we're doing. We've broken up the Bills defense into all the position groups. So tonight we're going to go through safety, cornerback, linebacker, defensive tackle, and the edge position grouping. We're going to rank them on the team 1 through 5 because there's 5 position groups. And we're going to assign a number grade to each of those position groups. That number grade goes on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being amazing and arguably the best in the league, 1 being a dumpster fire and something needs to be fixed ASAP because it's a problem. And again, assigning number values to those position groups, and those values are based on strengths of that position group, concerns we have about that position group, the depth, anything and everything when it comes to the functionality. And again, all of those things, the strengths, the weaknesses, the functionality, the depth, that comes from our formulated, patented, I will say for myself and Kendall, our formulated and patented method of combining advanced metrics with what we see on film. We grind the tape, we grind the numbers to be able to put that holistic picture together. That's one that bothers me all the time. Like I'll put like a metric out on Twitter and people be like, well, if you use your eyes, so-and-so is terrible. I'll be like, I watch a ton of tape, so I disagree.
What about the other side of it too? Then you show the tape and then you get have you seen the metrics?
You never win. You never win. The metrics people always, especially too, if people have like, I don't want to say an agenda, but if someone wants to really bag on someone and you show like a good stat, they'll be like, yeah, well, if you pop on the tape, they're terrible. And if you do the opposite and show a good play on tape, they'll be like, well, yeah, look at his numbers though. He's awful. And it's just like, okay, why are you here? Why am I even doing this? Hopefully with this first position group, there shouldn't be too much of that. And for those of you who are joining us live here, you know how we like to do on the show, the live engagement, the energy, the back and forth with each other in the chat, and myself and Kendall here. So if you are here, every time we go to a position group, give us your rankings. Again, scale of 1 to 5. If you want to explain it in the chat, that's fantastic. Steven's already ahead of it.
Steven's already in with PowerPoint.
Saying it can't be anything less than 4.59 for PowerPoint and height, including depth. Fantastic. For those of you who don't know, Steven is a longtime viewer and listener of this show. And a couple weeks ago, he was talking about Jordan Poyer, and he did a typo, and he got auto-corrected to PowerPoint for Poyer. So the rules are, he has to say PowerPoint now for the entirety of his life.
Yeah.
I don't think we've established an end of when that ends. So just know, Steven, you got to do it until the wheels come off. It's definitely going to happen. But hopefully for this first group, we don't have too much, consternation or too many problems from people. But again, everybody throw your grades in there, positives, negatives, concerns, questions, thoughts, comments, anything and everything. Throw it at us. We're prepared. Oh, Kendall, make sure, remind me about that question that I got on Twitter in regards to the edge groups, because I'm definitely going to forget at some point. It's on my brain now, but I wanted to mention it to you now.
I'll keep it up on my phone so it's a constant reminder.
I appreciate you. You're smart. Kendall, you are the guest. I'm going to delay a little bit here to make sure I get that time.
You're good. I got it
up there. Cool. You see, you're such a professional. It's so fantastic. That's why I invite you back. Let's start with the safety groups. Much like we did last week, what is the grade that you gave the safeties, and where do they rank in terms of the 5 position groups on the Buffalo Bills defense?
I think this is going to be low for some people, but
Time out.
Oh,
what do you mean I'm slacking on the tree? We're still in June. This is still June decor. We haven't yet reached July. Once July happens, the tree will change. The tree is very important. I take this. Those are fighting words. If we're in the streets, it's a green light for you. How dare you? How dare you? I'm not slacking on the tree.
He's got to come back in and say why he thinks.
Yeah, I need to know why the tree is slacking. It's June. Like, we're still here. That's why you still got the little yellow lantern over there. We got the yellow garland over there. It's still June.
Yeah.
We're not in July yet. I know it's like 4th of July week, but it hasn't started yet. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Man.
Not there yet.
And then he laughs out loud. You can't call my tree game into question. I think this is all fun and jokes. This isn't. I'm glad you're going first. I'm going to mute myself and just yell into the mic. I need some time to compose myself. Kendall, go ahead. Give your grades.
I'm curious what this grade is going to do to you. I think we're going to be ballpark in the same range, but I do think I'm probably a little bit low than most of the fan base on this. But safeties are my number 1 group on the defense. They're number 1 with a grade of 3.9.
Whoa.
So high threes. I was really close to getting to
Wow.
4, but I could only go to high 3s. And
We differ.
yeah, you're a lot higher on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's
Cool.
totally understandable. The main reason was really just the depth. It's just like, what happens if one of them
That's
goes
fair.
down? What happens if you're throwing DeMar Hamlin in there or Jaquan Johnson? I think a lot of
Steven
people.
said it. Kendall's going to
Yeah.
drop a low grade.
I realized I was a little inflated last week, so I wanted to be a
You're
little
trying
bit
to
more true
balance
to
it
my
out?
feelings. Yeah, I'm trying to balance it out this week. I probably overcompensated, but either way, it stems with DeMar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson. I think we know what we have with Jaquan Johnson. I think we know that he's someone that can work in the defense. We've seen him get some snaps, but it seems like every time there's an opportunity to give him snaps, they give it to someone else. Like we saw Dean Marlowe taking snaps away from him a lot when he had the opportunity a couple of years back. So I wonder, like, if something was to happen this year, would it even be Jaquan Johnson, or would they put DeMar Hamlin in? So I truly wonder on that. And obviously both of them are good depth safeties and they're very good on special teams. They both have a lot of contributions on special teams. But I just wonder what their impact would be if they were forced into a starting role. I really, really like DeMar Hamlin, like from a prospect scouting standpoint. I loved him coming out. I thought 6th round was ridiculous for him. I thought he should have been drafted higher. I thought he was a really versatile safety. Played a lot of slot, played a lot of single high, played a lot of everything.
Free, box, slot, like anything and everything.
He did everything. So I really love him as a prospect, but I still think he's like a year or two out from being a successor to either Hyde or Poyer. Yeah. So sure, the timetable is encouraging that, maybe next year he could be a successor. I don't know if he is though. So that's kind of the main thing. It's just I'm a little concerned on that front. But this grade to getting to 3.9.
This is your number one grouping?
This is my number one grouping too at 3.9. So yeah, I know, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how these grades come in. But the 3.9, the reason it got so high in the first place was because of we talked about last week. Like, are you confident calling DeMar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson 2.5s? Are you confident saying they're average? Because that's kind of the thing with the grading system. So it's really Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer pulling this grade together. Elite safety tandem. Obviously, they both earned All-Pro honors last year. Poyer was just fantastic. Finally put together that season where not only is he this run-stopping downhill from a too-high look, just absolute detonator, like you like to say, like he does everything.
This is a great comment.
Everything. Yeah, I love that. But he did everything this year. He put it together, not just the run stopping and the physicality. He came together with some pass stopping. The pass coverage was huge this year. His lowest metric, 30th in man reception percentage at 55.6. And then everything else is just top 10. He's 6th in zone reception percentage, under 50% at 46.2. 8th in passer rating when he's in man coverage at 21.3, and 1st in passer rating in zone at 13.5. Absolutely outstanding season for him in coverage. Cannot be understated. I really hope we find a way to sign him up. I don't know how long we're going to lock him up or if we are, but I really hope we do.
And then Hyde is around the corner and the same thing.
And
like
exactly,
an unrestricted free agent. We could be having this exact same conversation next year,
next off
for
with
Micah Hyde if he doesn't get locked up either.
Exactly. I was surprised to say though, Micah Hyde's metrics were not as good as I thought they would be.
Correct.
It was really shocking to me, but it also doesn't really align with the eye test of film.
That's
so I'm
where
not
the tape
really
comes in.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned about it. Like safeties. You have to go into the tape, in my opinion. This is how I view safeties and their metrics. You have to go into the tape if their metrics are bad, but you don't have to go into the tape if their metrics are good as much. If their metrics are good, like they're making plays on the ball, why it's happening. But safeties, for the most part, they're kind of like they're flowing plays to other players.
Yes, they funnel a lot.
Yeah, they're funneling it to other defenders. They're doing a lot of dirty work that just doesn't get picked up by metrics. So I'm not really looking at these metrics from Hyde and thinking, oh, okay, he's only top 30 in zone reception percentage out of man reception percentage and passer rating in man.
And you're also not getting like a grade there that is going to be, Hyde spun down and man covered somebody in the slot, and the quarterback saw how good the
Threw it
coverage
somewhere
was and was
else.
like, "Oh, let me go somewhere else." Like, there's
You don't
no
get
metric
that.
for that. That's what the
There's
tape is.
no metric.
I would say on both sides, I thought the metrics, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are both fantastic. I was surprised at how low certain metrics were for Hyde, just like I was surprised at how high some of them were for
Oh,
Jordan
okay.
Poyer. I wasn't expecting both. Like, I'm going to pull up a graphic in a minute that we used on the film room last night that
Yeah.
I created for that, just because, again, we're talking safety tonight. I was like, oh, it makes sense. And I was surprised where Poyer ranked for everything, but in a
Yeah.
good way. I was like, oh, wow. But
Outstanding.
then the same thing with Hyde. I was looking at stuff and I was like, really? Like, I wasn't expecting that. Again, based on what the tape shows.
Mm-hmm. My last thing on this is, do we count Siran Neal as a safety?
No.
Okay. Because I mean, I don't even know where to count him, period, because I don't know what his defensive impact is going to be.
He doesn't count. He's like the when you play like NCAA and you're recruiting guys, and then there's like the athlete category. That's what he is. Like, he's on the depth chart as like ATH for athlete. Like, he doesn't have like
because that's the sad thing. Like, whatever group I would have put him into, I honestly didn't even factor him into any of the grades in the secondary because I one, didn't know where to fit him, and two, would he make a defensive impact? Is it only going to be special teams? But that
I would put him more into the corner category.
Is
the special
outstanding.
teams impact. Oh, it's so real. And I would put him more into the corner category. And it's Tommy Siran Swiss. That's fair.
There you go. The only one is Josh Thomas. I don't know if Josh Thomas is even really going to crack this team. Obviously, he had the flashy preseason last year.
Or maybe Nick McLeod, if they move him over to safety. He was getting some
I
safety in OTAs.
Loved hearing that in OTAs. And didn't Poyer say he like reminded him of himself or something like that? So that's all like
multiple times so far here.
Very encouraging. McLeod has been someone that I've definitely had my eyes on since last offseason when he got scooped up as an undrafted free agent. But yeah, exactly. Siran could be the big nickel. Who knows? But yeah, so safety group, it's really led by Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And then there's just this massive fall off. And we don't know how far that fall off truly is because none of these guys have really gotten real playing time on defense. So it's really hard to make that grade because there's really no control group on the depth.
That's fair.
If there was a Dean Marlowe here, it would be easier for me to put this into the fours because you know what you're going to get from Dean Marlowe if he comes in. We don't know what we're going to get from DeMar Hamlin or Jaquan Johnson if they come
in. Very interesting with where you went. I think part of it would factored in with the depth for me. Like, unless you're the Baltimore Ravens, how many teams are out here rocking like 3 or more than 2 safeties where you're like, oh, all 3 of these guys can play. Like, more than 2 guys can play. And I think that factored into it for me as well. Like, because again, like, I'm ranking them, like we talked about last week, we're ranking them within the Bills, defense, but you're also, your ranking is coming from like, okay, what does a 5 look like? What does a 4 look like across the league? Like, what team's safety group has this number associated to it and why do they have it? And yikes. And I was trying to delete that other comment. Why do they have it and why are they given that grade and what corresponds to what? And, so for me, for my safeties grade here for Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, they were my number 1 as well. I gave the safety group a 4.5.
Okay. Wow.
I think they're the best safety tandem in the NFL. A lot of it is based on how interchangeable they are. You've got guys who can play in a split safety look, who can play in a single high look, who can spin down and cover in man, who can spin down and cover in zone. They can come down and, function in a sky look or a buzz look or a rat defender look. They can come up and blitz. They can come up and fit the run. They can fit the run from the box or fit the run from the slot. They can make tackles from depth and play that way. Like, there's just so many reasons why they're a huge benefit to this Bills defense, like what they allow the Bills defense to do. I mentioned it last night in the film room. I said it here in this episode and plug in that film room episode, shameless plug. They're the engine, the heartbeat of this defense. And I know there's a lot of good safeties in the NFL, like individually. I don't think there's a better safety tandem when you're looking at the combination of both, like a Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I don't think that at all. They are just fantastic because of that interchangeability, because of that versatility. And again, some of the metrics, I'm going to pull up where are we here? You spoke on some of them. this is a crazy graphic, and I'm going to take down the banner there so everybody can see. Like these, man, these grades for Jordan Poyer are just unreal. Among safeties with a minimum of 20% of coverage snaps, and there were 98 safeties who qualified. He had the third lowest reception percentage, the lowest yards per reception, the lowest passer rating against when targeted, the second most interceptions. Micah Hyde was first. The 18th lowest missed tackle percentage, which is even more impressive considering he has to come from depth a lot and make tackles from too high looks or split safety looks. He 47.5 coverage snaps per reception, which was 8th. He was first amongst all safeties in points saved in coverage, according to SIS. And then you go into the coverage specific metrics. 6th lowest reception percentage in zone, 4 interceptions in zone, the second most. The lowest, like you mentioned, that 13.5 passer rating against in zone, which was the lowest for those safeties. His passer rating against in man was the 8th lowest, like you mentioned. The coverage snaps per reception in zone, 5th. And then the coverage snaps per reception in man, 21st. Like everywhere you look, he's at the top for these metrics. And then you combine it with the film and you see what he did. And Micah Hyde, again, like you mentioned, the metrics weren't as strong for him, but somebody who you put the tape on and you can just see what he does every single play. And again, 6 interceptions. So these are numbers, again, amongst safeties with a minimum of 20% of coverage snaps, which again was 98 safeties. He had 6 interceptions, which was the most. He had 12 stops, which was 18th. He had a 6.5% missed tackle percentage in coverage, which was the 22nd lowest. He had 31 0.7 coverage snaps per reception, which was 18th, and he was 10th amongst all safeties in points saved in coverage. He also had the most interceptions in man coverage for safeties with 3, which is impressive, and it speaks to his prior life as a slot corner and being able to cover in man. And then again, in man coverage, 4 stops, which was tied for 9th amongst those safeties, and 49 coverage snaps per reception in zone, which was 8th. I don't see that. I don't see this Bills defense being the same without, honestly, both of them. And then you factor in the depth, right? So we talk about how top heavy, this group can kind of be because of the unknown quantities. I think Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin both can be sufficient. They're not going to give you the versatility that either Poyer or Hyde give you. I think Hamlin is more versatile and can do a little bit of everything as opposed to Jaquan Johnson. Jaquan Johnson is more of your in the box type of, he's not Cam Chancellor, but he's built to live more in that Cam Chancellor type of role and more sky or buzz coverages, fitting the run, forcing plays, spilling plays, folding inside, just coming into the box and living around the line of scrimmage. He can function deep, but you don't really want him around there because he's not as strong as he is when he is around the box. With Hyde and Poyer, you can do whatever, single high, deep, split, come up, man, zone, whatever have you, and they're going to succeed and execute at a high level. That's part of it too. Like you can be interchangeable and versatile, but you have that whole jack of all trades, master of none. They're a jack of all trades and they're also a master of all of them, which is, again, unbelievable. And like we mentioned in the film room last night, it's very coincidental that as this Bills team and this Bills defense has gotten better and evolved, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer have gotten better and evolved. So, there's a chicken and egg scenario there, which came first. Oh, really great comment here from Dilly Dilly Dale, because I've thought this. Jesse Bates for the Bengals reminds him of Micah Hyde. Same for me. The way he plays deep as a single high safety, also the way he wears his gloves and just kind of like his body form and how he dresses, what he looks like. He reminds me of a Green Bay Micah Hyde, less of a Bills Micah Hyde, but more Green Bay. But nice comp there for Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates is fantastic. And so I gave him a 4.5. Again, they're number one. It's carried obviously by Poyer and Hyde at the top there. But I think their depth behind them it's not ideal, but I don't think it is for any team. But I also think it's sufficient or reliable. Like, what you're going to get to a degree. There is some variability and there are questions that have to be asked. And you do lose, obviously, the benefit and the versatility, the multiplicity and the duality of Poyer and Hyde. But I gave him a 4.5. Largely because I'm, looking at the starters. But again, I do think there is something to be said of the depth in terms of its reliability behind them.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. I do, like I said, I have a lot of confidence in what Damar Hamlin will be, but those questions still kind of have to be answered in my mind. So it's like, yeah, sure. Maybe if I'm grading Hyde and Poyer alone, I'm at 4.5. But then, if I'm giving Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin a 2.5, it's bringing them down from 4.5.
What do you think Hamlin and Johnson How do you think they stack up with other backup safeties around the league?
It's tough to say, but
Because that's where it like factors in. Because I
probably
think they're on
on
par.
par. It's tough to say they're better, but I'd probably say on par.
I think they're your not prototypical, but I think they're your kind of like standard backup safeties. Like they've got limitations, they've got some strengths, they've got some things you can work with. That's part of why I didn't like knock the group as a whole. And again, also, and we'll get into this in a bit, when talking about the rest of the position groups on defense, I don't think there's any more question marks for Johnson and Hamlin than there are the depth position guys at all the other position groups on the defense. That
makes sense. Yeah.
Well. Yeah. Of course it made sense. I said it. I'm super smart, Kendall. Also, you can't disagree with me because it's my show. Yeah. It's written into the contract, the official bylaws. That'd be funny. I kind of want to do that. Just be a guest on people's shows and just constantly like disagree with them and just be like, no, even if they're like 2 + 2 = 4. I'm like, no, just
no, you just don't get it, man.
Just be like the worst guest. Oh yeah, just be like, not if you watch the film. No, that would just be. I would be so mad if I were the host. Like, what do you like? I'd be messaging in the chat. I'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you
sabotaging the show?
Yeah, why are you the way that you are? We're gonna stay in the secondary for this next position group that we break down. We're gonna go to corner, because now I'm very interested to see what your corner grade is, knowing what you let off with for safety. So I'm very interested to see, where corner ranks for you amongst the 5 position groups on the Bills defense. Obviously, it has to be 2 through 5 since safety is your 1. I'm very interested to see what grade you gave them and where they rank.
Okay, so the corners are number 2, and they're right behind them at 3.8.
Wow, you were very close. Okay.
Yeah, like right behind them. This was really one of the toughest ones for me because I think the depth is better. The depth is better at corner. But
yes, because in theory, Dane Jackson is like your third outside corner. I'm more confident in Dane Jackson as the third corner than I am either of the safeties as the third safety.
Exactly. But the top end of Poyer and Hyde is better than just one top end player in Trey White. So that's kind of what evened it out and just fell just below that 3.9 and ultimately had them coming in at 3.8. So I'm going to go through player by player that really made me influence this grade, but I'm going to go in probably a weird order that people aren't going to think of. And I'm going to leave Kaiir Elam last because he's the biggest question.
Okay.
So Trey White, obviously borderline
also a question.
Fair, but I didn't put that into the grading, I mean, whatever happens with this injury happens.
See, this is funny just how we like go over it. Like I didn't really knock him for it, but I included it in my ranking and rating.
At all. I didn't at all because I mean, sure, this is more of a projection grade for the season. So I think that it is fair to include it. But I was kind of just looking at the group and grading it talent wise. I didn't want to same way I didn't really include Andre Smith's suspension in a sense. Like
no, but that's fine. That's what part of makes this exercise fun because you've got it's the same thing with like scouting. You can have 10 scouts watch the same player and you can get 10 different evaluations because people look for things differently. They grade things differently. They see the game or think about it differently. So all fair. Continue.
So no, you're good. So obviously borderline top 5 corner. I think some people are wishy-washy on if he fits into that top 5 or not. Once again, it falls into what you're looking for if you're scouting it differently.
I was going to say, like, how do you define what you can make a case for legitimately probably like 8 corners, maybe even 9 of who you want to be in your top 5?
Yeah, there's so many arguments to be had, but he's undoubtedly an elite zone corner. So for that reason, he's elite for our system and we get the most out of him. And then even when he is matching up in zone or we ask him to play man, he's so sticky and physical in coverage that it works so well for what we do on defense. And he's physical enough as a tackler. I think he's gotten better over time with his missed tackle rate. I'd have to go back and actually look at that, but I feel like he used to miss tackles a lot more.
He still misses more than I'd like, but
sure.
Yeah, he's improved.
But that's also not necessarily why we're paying him. Like that's not.
I hate that argument. I hate when I'm like, well, this corner has issues with his tackles, and people are like, well, we pay him to cover. I'm like, but still,
it's not and it's important because obviously that's why Dane Jackson's still around. That's why Levi Wallace was continuing to stick around. Like it's clearly something that the Bills.
It's like if a race car driver can't park the car, the team is like, well, we pay him to race. I'm like, but he should still be able to park.
He should still be able to not crash.
Like, he's still a driver, correct? Like he shouldn't be running over the pit crew.
But but it's less important to an
Fair.
extent. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. But that's a great analogy. You shouldn't run over the pit crew.
Right? And everybody's like, oh my God, look at him. But then the owner's like, yeah, but he races. He goes fast. He's so great. And then he's just running over. He's just like running over toes and feet left and right and just crashing into dudes, and helmets are cracked everywhere.
So I don't really need to go too deep into Trey White because obviously we all know what we have in Trey White. Yes. He's 14th in overall reception percentage last season in 2021 at 53.4, 6th in overall passer rating when targeted at 61.4. So we know he makes it really difficult for guys. He really doesn't allow much. He makes his matchup fight for every single inch of grass on the field. So that's the great thing about Trey White. We wish him a speedy recovery, and it sounds like he is having one. So hopefully he gets back.
I like this comment. Pit crew gets run over at least once a year.
At least once a year. It's in the quota.
It's in the contract.
All right. So next one that I'm going to is Teron Johnson, because I view Teron Johnson as the second best corner on this roster.
1,000%.
He's one of the more integral pieces to the Buffalo Bills defense since he arrived. And I feel like that really doesn't get spoken about enough, probably because we're always searching for CB2 and we're all like, oh, you need two guys to cover the outside and all that stuff. And we've just been in that purgatory of looking for it. But I mean, he's just allowed them to live in nickel and match with 11 personnel or even match 12 personnel with the ability he has to confidently fit the run and the ability and the dependability that the coaching staff places on him to fit the run when it's 12 personnel or 11 personnel. And they really, really only take him off the field when there's a clear mismatch, when there's a clear, oh, this team's going to run the football. They're going to get into a jumbo set. They're going to go 13. They're going to go 21, something like that. They're like, okay, we can't keep Teron on the field. It just
but even then, they'll still like leave him in to a degree. Like it's not like
exactly.
It's not like a guarantee. Like, oh, they brought in another tight end or another running back. Oh,
it's really a matchup based thing. It's never like, oh, once they hit this personnel, Teron's got to come out. It's more like, what team are we playing? And then if they hit that personnel, maybe we start to just do that every single time, and that threshold is met. But even then, like, to say that it's that matchup driven and you're that confident that someone sub 200 pounds is going to match up in that way and fit the run like that, it's very encouraging, and it allows Leslie Frazier to do things that he otherwise might not have been able to do. And this defense may not have reached the peaks that it has reached in the past few years. So a lot of that should be attributed to Teron Johnson. So
he plays such an important role in today's NFL. Like a nickel or a slot corner used to just be a sub package role. It's pretty much a starter for the heavy majority of NFL teams, especially for the Buffalo Bills that have been heavy nickel for so long.
Oh yeah. The nickel is, it's finally starting to get its respect where, it is based now. So I'll get into his run stats first and then coverage stats. Run, he's 12th among all corners in run stop percentage at 4.4% with 14 stops, and average depth of tackle, he's tied for 18th among corners at 2.8 yards, which is honestly wild that there are 18 corners above him that have less than 2.8 yards per tackle. That is wild to me, that corners are making tackles that close to the line of scrimmage. Good on them. Good on Teron Johnson for making tackles. Good on Teron Johnson for making tackles sub 3 yards from the line of scrimmage. That's really impressive. So I'm not necessarily looking at that 18, but I'm more looking at
looking at the yardage, the metric.
2.8 is really, really solid for a nickel corner. So moving on to coverage stats. This is where it gets a little bit wonky, but I want to focus on one, and it's the first one. 17th in man reception percentage at 45.8%. I feel like this is something that he's really, really come into. His man coverage has really grown. I feel like we've seen stuff in training camp and him kind of getting picked on through years and years and years where he's grown. He's really grown in his mirror match abilities, his ability to be quick twitch, especially when he's guarding in the slot. You got to match those quick twitch guys. And now that we're starting to see more of these power slot guys, he's got the physicality to match both of those archetypes on the inside of offenses there. So I really like his ability in man coverage. And then obviously I saw it a few times this past year, but even in zone, he is part of the disguising of coverages. There we go. I was waiting for that.
Well done.
He is part of it. He is really part of it with Poyer and Hyde. They roll him into two deep coverages. Sometimes he's the third guy in 3 deep coverages.
Yeah.
They do a lot of creative
He
things
functioned as like a
with
split high
Teron
safety,
Johnson.
or like an outside corner in like in a 3 deep look.
The way you talk about like the Ravens and how, I'm not really talking about Damar Hamlin or Jaquan Johnson as a third safety on this team. The third safety is kind of Teron Johnson. The Bills kind of run a 3 safety defense in the sense of how they use Teron Johnson.
He's like a big nickel, but tiny.
Yeah, he
But
plays
actually
bigger
even-
than his size.
He does play bigger than his size, but even by size standards, if you're looking at like nickel corners, he's not small. He's 5'11", 192. Like your normal nickel corner is anywhere from like 175 to like 185 pounds. He's bigger for a nickel corner. Like he's almost 6 feet and he's 190 plus. Like again, he's tiny versus like a third safety or a linebacker, but for nickel corners, he's got some size to him.
100%. So the rest of the coverage stuff, he's 40th in zone reception percentage, 39th in passer rating in man, 70th in passer rating versus zone. But we know we've talked about it this offseason. Passer rating versus zone, reception percentage versus zone. It's really wonky, and you got to look at the context of it because a lot of times it's being graded as just nearest defender. So I'm not putting too much on him, and I am really honing in on the 17th in man reception percentage. I think that is something that we really need to hone in on.
And he plays on, especially with like those type of the closest defender gets dinged. That's why like the guys more towards the center of the field. So Taron Johnson, Milano, Edmonds, those guys are going to get dinged left and right for receptions allowed in zone because they're the closest guy to the ball carrier. If somebody completes something underneath and you're towards the middle of the field, like just by proxy and just by the odds of it, one of them is going to be closest to the ball, even if that's 100%. Not their guy, even if that wasn't their responsibility.
Yep. Middle of the field gets dinged. They get dinged
every
hard.
Time.
All right. And then next one is Dane Jackson. So in my opinion, Dane Jackson is kind of just going to be the new Levi Wallace if he's re-signed or not, like next offseason, if he's re-signed or not. But for this year, he feels like the new Levi Wallace for me. He's going to compete for CB2 and has a relatively high floor that you can depend on. You know what you're going to get from him. He still has room to grow. I don't think he's reached his ceiling by any means, but I think you know where his floor is at, and he has a level of dependability and trust with the coaching staff, and that is valuable. So I think he will compete for CB2 for that reason, but obviously they want Kaiir Elam to win that job because they place a lot of investment into him. But moving into his stats, obviously we know his run stopping stuff. He's 20th in missed tackle percentage with just 1 missed tackle. There were 19 guys tied for 0% missed tackle rate with 0 missed tackles this year. So he was 20th because he had 1.
Because he missed 1
tackle. So
unreal.
Context needs to be added there. 26th in stop percentage with 6 stops at 2.7%. Obviously, knowing how much he played, the stop percentage is really more important than the total stop numbers. So 26 at 2.7%. That efficiency is pretty solid for someone that only really played the back end of the season. And then when you get into coverage stats, the disparity here for him is in zone versus man. I'll start with his man. He's 62nd in man reception percentage at 57.9. Then passer rating in man, he's tied for 52nd at 89.8. So that's 62nd and 52nd. Then you jump to zone. 7th in zone reception percentage at 46.2 and 13th in passer rating in zone at 56.3. So this guy, when I talked about that high floor, level of dependability, trust from the coaching staff, you see it, especially when it comes to being good in this scheme, in this system, what this team asks of him, the ability to come up, fit the run on the edges of the defense, and also play your zone. He is solid in those 2 regards. And for that reason, he's going to have that level of trust from the coaching staff. And that brings us to Kaiir Elam, likely the guy that would usurp him from that role at CB2 and hopefully does. No knock to Dane Jackson, but hopefully does in the regards of return on investment. So Kaiir Elam, I don't want to obviously jump into metrics with him because he had the noted dip in play in 2021 and did so well in 2020 at Florida. But the main thing with him is all theorizing. The idea of replacing Levi Wallace with Elam is exciting because it's an influx of athleticism into the position. It's going to be interesting to see what the coaching staff can get out of him at that spot with the added athleticism because we just haven't seen that. We've
No.
seen Levi Wallace and we've seen Dane Jackson, 2 subpar athletes in terms of testing
Yes.
at that position. And they've been fine. They've been sufficient. They've been more than sufficient at times. But it will be really interesting to see what they can do with that added athleticism. So I'm not sure if Kyer Elam's floor is anywhere near Levi Wallace's floor for Kyer Elam in year 1.
Yeah.
But it's really exciting, and I'm happy that the Bills took the swing for the fences at athleticism at the cornerback position. So for that reason, I'm really excited for it. And rounding those 4 guys off brought me to 3.8. I think obviously there are guys outside of that, like the Nick McLeods. I don't know if Nick McLeod's actually going to play corner or if he's going to play safety, if he's going to make the team. Christian Benford. Like there's a ton of different guys, but those are the 4 guys that really brought me to my grade.
Oh, very in-depth. You mentioned a lot of the metrics and numbers that I was going to mention, so I'm glad I don't have to double dip on that.
Yeah, I went metric heavy on my notes today.
I see. I like that. And to answer Dale's question here, yes, Trey White did start as a rookie. One of the very few in the McDermott tenure. But again, a lot of that was also based on need. Like they cleaned house immediately, like when they came in that 2017 year. So granted, Tre'Davious White was good, but also like based on where the team was, he kind of had like no shot but to start. Him and Tremaine Edmonds were pretty much, I think, like the only rookies that were day one starters.
Did Dion Dawkins start?
I don't
right, that's escaping me, right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's gonna bother me. I don't know
remember if he did right away. Cody Ford No, Cody Ford was a swing. He was switching in and out with Ty Nsekhe. So that's fair, very fair, very fair. All right. Actually, yeah, but even I'm going into Steven's comment here. Josh Allen, they wanted to sit a little bit. I'm still of the belief that they didn't want to feed him to that Ravens defense early on in the year. And so
no, I don't think they did either.
Go out and do your thing.
The locker room would have lost McDermott though if they kept Peterman in.
Oh yeah, but that wasn't gonna happen. Zaylen says Dion Dawkins started because shocking Cordy Glenn was hurt. That's what was in my head, and then Glenn got traded in that deal that helped land Josh Allen. Well played. Oh, and also comment here from Dale. Yeah, Ed Oliver as well, coming out and seeing meaningful snaps as well. Well played. Look at the chat.
They did good. They did good right there. Most of the first round picks though that have started right away kind of had to. Like they literally had to. Like Kyer Elam does not have to start, but he really should.
In theory. I mean, I think what's also going to work in his favor is, again, like you and I have both stated on this show and in other things this offseason through Cover One, I don't see Tre'Davious White being ready in week 1 or even really through September. I would see like more of an October, November-ish time range for him starting. And based on that, Kyer Elam and Dane Jackson are your corner 1 and corner 2, however you want to look at them to start the year. And so now time for rankings. So you gave them what, a 3.8?
Yes, sir.
And they were number 2. So I gave the corner grouping a 4.0.
Fair.
They were also my number 2 grouping. And, again, I started it with Trey, who is, again, a top 5 corner. And you just have to be in the Rolodex. Trying to decide who the top 5 corners are, or even like a lot of top 5 guys in sports. It's so hard because there's some level of subjectivity to it in terms of like what you look for, how you grade it.
It's
similar to
like so dynamic. It's always changing. It
is. And it's almost like I liken it to trying to create like a top who are your top 5 rappers. Like everybody has like a different list. Like the goal, you should just want to be in that Rolodex. When everybody's like, who's the top 5 corner? You immediately want to be like, oh, okay, well, you got like Ramsey, you got Jair Alexander, you got AJ Terrell, you got Trey, you got this guy, you got that guy. Like you should just be in that Rolodex. And based on who you're asking, you might be in the top 5 or you might just be in the Rolodex. As long as you're in it, you're good to go. That's where Trey is. We know he's top notch. And everything that he does, he's the poster child for why I wanted a better skill set level and trait piece at corner 2 because of what the Bills are able to do with Trey. You can have 3-by-1 looks and leave Trey on an island by himself with a number 1 or number 2 receiver, and you can play man coverage with him. You can play different games and what he's able to do and function in spot drop zone or pattern matching or man match, whatever you want from him. He can do so many things. And so having a similar counterpart, even though Trey's not an amazing athlete, but he's so skilled, having someone else at corner 2 who has any amount of dials turned up just increases the versatility. And so we know what we have in Tre'Davious White. But a lot of the reason, again, like you mentioned, the reason this group was so high for me, we talk about Trey as being a top corner in this league. I think Taron Johnson is one of the best slot defenders in this league. He's right there with Kenny Moore in Indianapolis. He's right there with Mike Hilton in Cincinnati. I mean, if some people want to count Jalen Ramsey as like a slot defender because of how they use him as the star, but even that speaks to it, right? Like how important, yes, that slot position is, right? That the Rams move arguably their best defender, or right there, second only because they have Aaron Donald. The fact that they've got somebody and they're moving him inside of that slot position, that speaks to how important it is, especially, right, when you're trying to defend the run with a light box. You can't be outgunned from a size perspective or a skill perspective, but mainly size in that slot defender role. You can't have it be where you can have a power slot or a tight end who's put in the slot, or a tight end hip to the line, and they can just run your nickel corner right out. You can't be outgunned there. You need somebody who can cover, but you also need somebody who's aggressive enough and stout enough to be able to fit the run, which is why Taron Johnson is so important. He fits the run like a linebacker. I feel like he doesn't know that he's like under 200 pounds. He comes up like he plays the run like he looks in the mirror and thinks he's AJ Klein. Like that's what, like he's like the little dog who thinks he's like a German Shepherd, but it's really just like a corgi. Yeah. And like he's violent, he's aggressive. He's added more technique to his physicality, so he's getting hurt less and he's reduced his injuries. But you mentioned, the man numbers, the zone numbers. He does so much. I've gone back and watched a lot of tape of his over the last couple of weeks, and you see him in Kansas City. He holds his own in man coverage against Tyreek Hill, and he should not, because he is not the athlete or the speedster that Tyreek Hill is, but he wins with his physicality, his footwork, his positioning, his ability to maintain leverage. Watching him go toe-to-toe with a variety of body types and receiver types and still hold his own, I think Taron Johnson, I would even be so bold as to say that, again, I think Hyde and Poyer are the two most important players for the Bills defense. After them, I think Taron Johnson might be second, or he's right there in lockstep with Tre'Davious White. And I think it was a great point by you. Everybody always talks about, corner, and everybody always focuses on the outside, and they forget or overlook that nickel, because the nickel is like, what is he like? Does he fall into like kind of linebacker importance? Does he fall into corner importance? Is it his own position? Is it
the fact that you have to ask those questions shows how important it is, because it's affecting multiple areas of the defense.
Yes, and you've got to be able to play. You got to play head up. You have to be able to maintain leverage inside or outside, and also just from the perspective of people don't get it as well. You're almost always on an island because the guy you're guarding has a two-way go.
Yep.
He can go left. He can go right. He can go vertical. He can go short. He can run under. He can run intermediate. He can do anything. When the farther a receiver or tight end or whoever gets outside, their options become more limited based on how far away they are from the quarterback, based on how you can play them, based on where the sideline is. There's all these variables that start to reduce the amount of possibilities that they have to run from a receiver position. When you're in the slot, the world is kind of your oyster. That's part of the reason why Cole Beasley has been so great, because he can do anything and he has no tells. He'll come off the line and you're like, is he going short? Is he going deep? Is he going in? Is he going out? Oh, he made a move. Oh, he went the other way. Crap, I'm beat. Like there's so many options for you as the slot receiver because of that two-way go and where you're lined up. Not to mention you're usually off the line of scrimmage. So even if you want to come up and press a slot receiver, they still got some yards of room. It's not like you're face mask to face mask like you can be with an X or somebody who's on the line of scrimmage. It's tougher. So much is asked of that corner position. And Taron Johnson is just right there. If you look at of corners with at least 20% of coverage snaps in 2021, slot corners, outside corners, all of them, there were 129 corners with 20% of coverage snaps last year. Taron Johnson had the 23rd lowest reception percentage. Everything focused together. Man added with zone. Yeah. He had the 23rd lowest reception percentage out of the 129 corners that had at least 20% of coverage snaps. That's fantastic, especially considering, again, that's factoring in being the slot guy and somebody running a slant or somebody running an under by you, or if somebody runs a tight end screen and you read it and you come up, boom, like you're going to get dinged, even if you make the tackle on short, but that counts as a reception against you. There's so many more opportunities to get dinged. And the fact that he was 23rd out of 129 in a position that sees so much action, in a position where so much is asked of you, I've come to really appreciate Taron Johnson's game this offseason.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the best nickel guys in the league. I think he's easily top 5 nickel. I think you could put him up there in top 3, depending on what you're looking for. I think Kenny Moore might be a little better in coverage overall, but I don't think there's a nickel corner that fits the run like Taron Johnson. And with how many light boxes the Bills play, that's so important for what he's able to do. So major kudos to Taron Johnson, part of raising this grade for this group. Dane Jackson is another one I wanted to speak of. I'm going in a similar order to you. I was not expecting some other metrics here. You mentioned several. Some of these for Dane Jackson, kind of like Poyer, blew me away. So again, amongst corners with at least 20% of coverage snaps, which there were 129, in zone coverage, Dane Jackson was second in snaps per reception.
Oh, wow.
31.3. Second in snaps per reception in zone coverage. So he didn't allow he allowed a reception in zone coverage every 31 snaps, which was second out of 129 qualifying corners. But again, you mentioned it, and we've talked about it several times with Dane. That speaks to the coaching he got at the University of Pittsburgh. His zone skills are tremendous. If he was a better athlete, he's a bona fide number 2, maybe even a 1 for some teams. And he held his own a little bit in man coverage, even though that's where he's more vulnerable.
Right.
He's a very good zone corner. His eyes, his footwork, his ability to understand spacing and leverage, and he can sit there in cloud coverage and be able to space the under and the intermediate and make a play either way. He did that his rookie year when he picked off Sam Darnold for the Jets. He's playing in that cloud look. He's covering the underneath, and then he drifts and drops back, reads the eyes, extends, boom, interception. Also, some numbers for him. So again, 129 corners. He averaged 8.2 yards per reception in zone, which was the 18th lowest, and then 16.4, double in man, almost. Actually, exactly double. So 8.2 yards per reception in zone, which was the 18th lowest, 16.4 yards per reception in man, which you're like, oh man, double, that's not great. That was still, that was the 25th most. So speaking to your points there, you flip it, like you see some of those deficiencies start to hinder him a little bit in man. And I misread my notes. I thought it said 25th lowest. I was like, that's amazing. And I was like, no, that's bad.
That's
like
highest,
I have to reread that. But again, that speaks to why Kaiir Elam is so important.
Right.
Because with his athleticism, that ceiling is a little higher. You don't have to shade over the top with Hyde or Poyer or whatever, protect with different games. And, a couple other metrics. You may have mentioned one of these. But again, Dane Jackson, the 13th lowest passer rating against when targeted in zone coverage. I just wanted to drill that home again. Like that's, and even in man, the 52nd lowest, which out of 129 in man isn't terrible considering that's his weaker spot. And again, overall, when you're combining everything, overall, not coverage specific, overall, Dane Jackson had the 36th lowest passer rating against when targeted in 2021. Out of 129 corners, he was 36th. That's your third corner in theory. That he's in the top. Again, like top, but like the 36th lowest because you want to be lower in terms of the pass rating against. That's unreal when you're pairing him with Tre'Davious White and Taron Johnson and Kaiir Elam. And I've said it multiple times on the show, even when Trey comes back, I think you see a platoon at corner 2. Whether much like what we saw with Kevin Johnson and Levi Wallace in that 2019 year, I think they either alternate drives or you're mixing guys in based on the skill set or the personnel or the receiver grouping. Like, okay, is this a week where the receivers are a little more physical and they're bigger and the team runs more 2 tight end looks? Oh, it is? Cool. Maybe this is a Dane Jackson week because of his ability to crack, replace, and come up and make tackles. We've already heard Leslie Frazier praise him as being one of the best young tackling corners in the NFL, and that is legit. Go back and watch during the COVID year when Seattle throws a quick little screen to DK Metcalf, and Dane just comes up and in the dirt. And he's I mean, everybody's undersized when it comes to DK Metcalf, but he puts him down quick. It's not like he hits him and like struggles and gets him down, and it's like, oh, good job. He sticks him and puts him down. That's a big thing. And that, in theory, again, is your corner 3. Then you add Kaiir Elam into the mix. his athleticism, his scheme versatility, the press man ability, the headiness, how smart he is, how he studies tape, and how he understands how to study tape. Because that's a big part of it too. It's not enough just to watch the tape. If you don't know how to watch it and you don't know what to take away from it and then put that into application on the practice field and in the game, it doesn't do you any good. It's like watching a movie that's in a language you don't speak with no subtitles. Like you're watching the movie, but you're not understanding what's going on with the movie. So Kaiir has that. He's just got to be able to connect it physically, which is not a known quantity at this point. But all that being said, that's why they had a 4.0 for me. I think they're one of the best overall, holistically, corners and safeties. I think they're one of the best secondaries in the league because of what they can do for each other. But again, even with this cornerback grouping, Trey, puts them up on another level because of what he is. And then given what you have to work with Dane and Kaiir on the outside. But again, it's that nickel piece. It's what Taron Johnson can do. The ability to be able to play pass, but still fit the run. That's huge. He can be a coverage to action guy or an action to coverage guy. That's so valuable in general. But today's NFL, or especially in today's NFL, man, we spoke a lot here on these first two. We're an hour in. We've only hit 2 groups. I am not surprised.
They were the most prolific groups on the team, though, or on the defense. So
that is true. And now we move on to a group that is more top heavy, and I think will require less verbiage to kind of, well, maybe not given how juxtaposing one of these players is. Let's move on to the linebackers. So give me your grade, give me your ranking, and the whys and the hows behind it.
So the grade I gave for the linebackers is a 3.3, and where it ranks is 4th on the defense. Is this exact?
No, I went with 3.4. I just think it's so funny because they're so, like, the fact that we both went with like decimal gradings and we're so close still. I find that very funny.
I didn't know if you were laughing at a comment or how close it was.
No, because it was so close and you were like 3.3. I was like, get the hell out.
All right. So obviously most of this is a top heavy grade. It really is, based on my opinion of Edmonds and Milano. So I'll get into it. And I do think both of them are above average. I think it's understandable with Edmonds. People think he's closer to average than above average. I think he's closer to above average than average, but there are times where he's getting close to average play or even below average.
I think that's it. I think overall he's closer to an above average player, but he has plenty of times where he looks like a below average guy. There's too many peaks and valleys.
It's the variance. It's 100% the variance with him. But when you look on the season long stuff with him, you realize like, oh, these metrics are actually kind of good. And he's really not a bad player. He fits well into the team. And think about how much responsibility is thrust onto him. The communication side of things, literally the QB of the defense, and he's done that from day one, and he's had to grow through those growing pains. So that's why I think he doesn't get enough love, but I do understand the ridicule. Like it's all rooted in, passion, really. So it's understandable, but I do think he is average to above average on the grand scale of things. So despite all the ridicule, that is what I think of him. When I jump into the metrics, I'm going to hop into the run stuffing stuff. He's 11th in missed tackle rate at 5.9. So I know a lot of people think, Edmonds, he's missing all these tackles. He's 11th. Out of qualifying linebackers, it missed tackles 5.9% of the time he's missing a tackle. That's better than Roquan Smith. Just to put it into perspective, one of those darling linebackers that everyone wants.
And that's always, especially because they went in the same class. Everybody always says, I'd rather have Roquan. I'd rather have Leonard. And again, that might be true either way. But, we got a really good question and we got a super chat. Thank you very much for the donation, AK Cash, and also one, thank you for the donation. We appreciate it. 2, thank you for being here and joining us live. I'm falling over my words. I'm so excited for this question. 3, thank you so much for the thought-provoking question. Kendall, I'll go to you first since you have the floor.
Sure.
AK Cash says, if Tremaine Edmonds has the exact same year as last year, what is his market value and do we re-sign him?
Market value is going to be ballpark because I've looked at it before a lot of times with APY, but I think it's somewhere ballpark around 13. If he has the same season, it's going to be somewhere around there.
I will
I can
say for
tell
you
you're pulling
right
it up.
now, yes, literally. And this is the number I had in my head, but I wanted to confirm. So according to Spot Track, as of right now, his market value is 4 years, 55 million, an average annual value of $13.8 million. That would place him as the 6th highest paid inside linebacker in the NFL, roughly around the same value as CJ Mosley, Zach Cunningham, Miles Jack, and Deion Jones, which when you hear the number, it sounds high, but then you look at
The
the
names.
linebackers that he's in the grouping with. Yeah, and I think it's fair.
Yeah, I think it's got to be somewhere near the Miles Jack number. As long as it's near that, I think his agent, and Brandon Beane did it all well. I think that's what makes the most sense. And to answer the do we resign him, like that's an impossible question to answer right now, unfortunately, with like everything that's happening with the players that are going to be expiring on contract for the Buffalo Bills, all the money they have tied up now, all the players that are developing ahead of schedule, the Dawson Knoxes, the Gabriel Davises, the Ed Olivers. It makes it really difficult to forecast
Christian
what
Wade.
decision the Bills are going to make. Why do you do this every show? You always have to bring them up.
Sorry, my fault. RB1.
but that's the tough part to this. Like, I think it was before last offseason. It was something during the season last year. I was like, yeah, sure. I think we're going to re-sign Tremaine Edmunds. But then you see more of the money come onto the books and you see more of these players start to progress. Like, I didn't know for sure if Dawson Knox was going to break out or not. And now that he did, it puts Tremaine Edmunds on the bubble. And now that Gabriel Davis has progressed as much as he did, now that Ed Oliver had the breakout that he did, it puts other people on the bubble.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's a good problem to have. This is what good teams, the problem they have. They have all these, drafted players and guys who are brought in, and their floors get raised and their ceilings get raised, and then other people take notice, and you have to figure out how to pay them. And real quick, I wanted to get this comment from Lone Wolf. Again, AK Cash, awesome question. Well done. Lone Wolf says, don't you have to be in position to make the tackle and miss for it to count as a missed tackle? Edmunds is out of position too often. That's fair. I just want to say, I don't think Edmunds is out of position as much as everybody thinks he is.
Yes.
I think run fits are a thing that are very complex, and there's so much that goes into it. And I think the easy blame for people, it's Occam's razor. Usually, like the simplest answer is the easiest, or the one you should go with. People like to bag on Edmunds, or they just see a big run play in the middle and they think, oh, well, that's Edmunds' fault. The one that always gets me, Ed Oliver made a play in New England where I think he goes to the B gap, but then he spins back into the A and makes a play. And everybody on Twitter was like, that was an amazing play by Oliver. And he cleaned up for Edmunds, who was in the wrong gap. Edmunds wasn't in the wrong gap. Ed Oliver crossed multiple times in different gaps, and Edmunds executed a gap exchange, but Ed Oliver kind of went rogue and did his own thing and went back into Edmunds' gap. But people see it and they're like, Edmunds out of position again. I agree with the out of position piece. I think there's a lot of times where he over pursues or under pursues. His angles to the football, both to the ball carrier and in the run game, are my biggest thing for him that I think he needs to work on to take his game to the next level. But I don't think he's as out of position as often as people think, in the same way that because of how much is asked of him to two gap, people are always like, oh, how come he didn't make the play? And it's because a lot of times he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, because of what is asked of him. And he's put into an almost non-winnable situation. So I get the comment here from Lone Wolf. And I think this is
metric wise, he is right. Like in terms of gathering this metric, he is 100%.
Yeah, that's fair. Right. And I just think this is a notion that a lot of people like the out of position piece. I think there is, merit to it. I just don't think it's to the extreme that everybody puts it to, where they think he's just like 7 out of 10 times is always out of position. I think there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think other people are at times to blame. Even the Damian Harris huge touchdown on Monday night against the Patriots in Buffalo. Edmunds didn't make a great play there, but there were also a couple other players that I don't want to just name drop now who did not take good angles of the football and were also out of position. But the easy thing is just there goes Edmunds again.
Yeah.
Blowing his gap, missing. There's just so much that goes into it. Oh, we got a lot of good comments. Very thought-provoking. Kendall,
I mean, this is what happens when you talk about Tremaine Edmunds.
I also jinxed it. I was like, oh, this should be a quick group to talk about. And then I should have known with the polarizing figure that is Tremaine Edmunds. So continue to talk about your 3.3 grouping and where they rank for you.
So I'll continue with some of the run stopping stuff. I left off with him being 11th in missed tackle rate, better than Roquan Smith. Next one is 19th. He's tied for 19th in stop percentage in the run game with at 7.6%. He is tied with another draft mate member, Fred Warner. I know,
Tied?
exactly. These things, it's
Tied?
like people want to compare to other people in the league. His peers say, oh, these linebackers are so much better. These very advanced metrics in terms of run stopping show that they are a lot more similar than you'd like to believe.
People also don't hold other players of other teams under the microscope like they do their own players, positive and negatively. Like, if your guy's balling out, he's a savior to football. If your guy's not playing to what you expect him to, he's the worst player in the league and everybody else is so much better. People don't look at the times when Fred Warner was out of position, or Devondre Campbell was out of position, or Darius Leonard was out of position. Even some of the metrics for Leonard, like you would think that, oh my God, every one of his metrics have to be amazing because the tape is amazing. And they're not all the time. Like, people need to hold those other players of other teams that isn't their favorite under that same microscope.
I will say his Darius Leonard's run stop rates, all of these metrics that I'm going through, they're really good. But when you get to coverage stuff, it's not as good as you would think.
Which is wild because he's so good in coverage.
He's so much better
out
in
there.
coverage.
He's out there baiting quarterbacks and making interceptions. And then you're like, oh, well, his coverage metrics have to be amazing. And then you see him and you're like, what?
Coverage metrics are very wonky, and that's going to be my second to last point on Edmonds. But next one is he's tied for 18th in average depth of tackle at 3.4. Once again, this is better than both Bobby Wagner and Devin White, two, once again, esteemed linebackers that Bills fans seemingly would love to have over Edmonds.
John just came into and said, what about depth of tackle?
Tied for 18th, John. Tied for 18th. And I know a lot of people will say, like, oh, 18th. There's 32 teams. That's below average because he's below 16. But this is out of, think about it this way, 64. There's 64 linebackers at least playing on any given down for every team around the league. And he's tied for 18th. That's above average.
Which I think is fair for him given, like, the amount of ups and downs that he has and how drastic he'll play, and he'll make a great play and then he'll make a bad play. And again, it all averages out to somewhere kind of in the middle, but like you said, that variance, it all comes down to the middle, but he's got some here and then he's got a lot down there.
Exactly. You got to look at the holistic data set, and it really does even out more than you would think. And people like to remember the negatives more than the positive. It is a nature that every fan has. Like we talked about it with Zach Moss last week. It's really, really easy to just remember those plays where you're like, oh my God, cut this dude. Cause I do it all the time, but you got to remember those moments when he's getting a first down and it just doesn't even matter. People don't think about that first down where you ended up punting and Zach Moss gets that first down and you just don't think about it. It's the same kind of thing where, oh, Tremaine Edmonds stopped them from getting a first down on third down. Then they go for it. They get the fourth down conversion and you kind of forget about how big that tackle was to even get them to third or fourth down. So it's in that same vein and it's hard to do, but jumping into coverage, I don't want to get into the coverage metrics, mostly because I guess I'm cherry picking mostly, but I'll be straight up with you guys. I'm cherry picking. No, but seriously, it is because of what we mentioned with Micah Hyde. And those numbers in coverage can be really, really deflated because of the way that they're gathered and the way that the Bills play defense, because they're gathered in the sense where you talked about with Teron Johnson too. In the middle of the field, you're just going to get picked on, especially in zone coverage metrics. You're just going to be the nearest defender a lot of the time, but then double down with how the Bills play defense and how they like to play top down, make sure that they're not letting anything get past them, keep everything in front of them, see the ball get recepted, and everyone rally to the ball carrier. That's going to inflate the quarterback stats for throwing towards Edmonds, deflate Edmonds' stats for being thrown at, all of that. It really makes it tough to contextualize those numbers. So it was just going to take too long and it doesn't make sense. But regardless, Edmonds' length and athleticism allows the Bills to be versatile in coverage because of the amount of space that he can eat up. And like I think back of that rep against, I think it was the Bucks where he's in Tampa too, and he's just carrying someone up the field. Or no,
I
that's
mean,
against the Chiefs,
he doesn't,
against
he
McCole
doesn't,
Hardman.
he doesn't, he carries Mecole Hardman, who runs a
Yeah.
4.340. He
So
carries him on a
so
post.
much versatility that he allows the defense to go through. So it gets understated. Those things don't show up on metrics. Those things don't show up on broadcast. No one's going to show that on a replay on broadcast. It just doesn't. It's a waste of everyone's time. But when you see it on all 22, when we're over here posting it on Twitter like maniacs, you got to take it into account. And it really does go to show how much he impacts the defense.
I want to bring up this comment because I think this is such a huge part of it. Everything for me with Tremaine Edmonds and a lot of the negativity he receives is the expectation. I think Lone Wolf hit it on the head. He says, I think I just expect more from a guy who's 6'5", 250. And then you add in the fact that he was a first-round pick and that the Bills traded up for him and that he goes to Sean McDermott, who also coached Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis and Shaq Thompson. And everybody's like, oh, my God, this guy has all these tools. He's gone to a coach. Even before that, who worked with guys like Jeremiah Trotter in Philadelphia and all this coach who's had all this success with all these linebackers. And now you've got this raw ball of clay. The sky's the limit. And it's like, okay, how come he's not hitting the sky given what he's been given by God? Like, why is he not hitting that? I think same thing like we talk about Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver's had a good career, but there's still people that are like, well, I was told he was going to be Aaron Donald and I expected that and he's not. So
to be fair, both guys just have not lived up to expectations at all. Either of them, even Ed Oliver, like they just haven't.
Oh, and I think this is the Bruce formula, right? Expectation minus reality equals disappointment. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's tough, but I think that's well said by Lone Wolf. Also really well said from Cash here, saying that his presence in the middle and coverage ups his value a lot. And I think that's part of the problem too with Tremaine Edmonds, because he does all of these things as a deterrent. Like his play and his positioning allows others to be successful.
The funneling theory again.
Yes. But what's tough is there's not a metric for funneling and it doesn't really show up on broadcast. So when you see, so here's a perfect example, right? You see a quarterback get to, his third read and throw late and Jordan Poyer jumps it and he picks it off and you're like, what an amazing play by Poyer. But you don't see that the reason the quarterback got to his third read and made that throw was because Tremaine Edmonds took away the middle of the field and the quarterback had to figure out where to go somewhere else. And then he went to the wrong read because Tremaine Edmonds deterred him. Edmonds doesn't get a point for that. It doesn't show up as a raw stat. It's not the highlight or the sexy piece of the play. It's a deterrent play. The same way that you get some guy who you get a defensive tackle or an edge who's the spiker on the stunt. He doesn't get a stat for the spike. If he takes up the guard and the tackle and it allows your defensive tackle to loop around and get the sack, everybody's like, oh man, what a sack from Ed Oliver. Great speed. And people aren't like, great spike by Jerry Hughes. You don't see that. The deterrents don't get the love. No. And I think that's not a problem, quote unquote, is a lot of the positives that Edmonds leads to, and Cash said it here, like his presence in the middle in coverage ups his value a lot. A lot of his presence in the middle is as a deterrent. So yes, he's not getting the interceptions or the pass breakups or those sexy plays, but his presence takes away the middle. And again, that's a piece. The Bills, as far as DVOA by pass direction, they were the number one pass defense in the middle of the field. That's because of Edmonds, Milano, Taron Johnson, and also your safeties to a degree. They were also number one in the deep middle as well. But a large function of that is because of what Tremaine Edmonds does as that deterrent. But it's not sexy and it's not flashy and people don't see it. And then you couple that with like, well, there was a run up the middle, Tremaine Edmonds' fault. And it's all these things that get convoluted and morphed and boom. But I love this comment here. I'm sorry I stole some of your thunder. I got excited.
No, you're good. You're absolutely good. I was all done on Tremaine Edmonds, so hopefully we can wrap up these linebackers relatively quickly. So on to Matt Milano. I think a lot of people, yep, exactly. Very similar to that.
Good comment. It's like for those listening and not watching, Cash had another comment here saying it's like the equivalent to a massive stud one tech against the run. Yeah, it's like the example we use all the time. It's like your Sam Adams and your Tony Saragusa, rest in peace, and your Haloti Ngata. Well, Ngata was a little sexier and kind of a unicorn, but all those guys that took up linemen so that Ray Lewis could just run sideline to sideline and do whatever the hell he wanted.
Mm-hmm. This is perfect timing. This is actually a perfect segue because that's actually exactly how I talk about the relationship between Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. I view Edmonds as the 1 tech and Matt Milano as the 3 tech. Matt Milano is allowed to run because of what Tremaine Edmonds does as a spacies or as an occupier. He does these kind of things. So Matt Milano can run around and be the run and chase guy. He allows him to do that kind of stuff. So I find it really beneficial for both guys. They kind of complement each other.
Yeah,
in
they
that
play
way.
off one another.
But Matt Milano, in my eyes, he's a slightly above average run defender with solid blitz production. I feel like that doesn't get talked about a lot, but he has
blitzer.
elite coverage skills, obviously. Elite
Yes.
coverage skills. That's what everyone talks about. But that blitz production, his ability to blitz, I feel like that kind of falls through.
And he's
cracks.
not great from a technique standpoint when he blitzes, but
it's
he's
tenacity. It's kind of like Terrell Bernard in a way.
He's relentless. He's a dog in every sense of the word. A nice comp for Bernard. Yeah, he uses explosion and speed, but he's just relentless. Like literally, like not to be corny, like a dog with a bone. Like he's just like got to get to the quarterback, got to get to the quarterback, got to get to the quarterback, no matter what. He doesn't stop.
It is like that, 100%. So I'll jump in. I'll leave the coverage stats for next because they are truly elite. But first one is he is worse than Edmonds in missed tackle rate and stop percentage, but he is better in terms of average depth and tackle at 13th and at 3.2 yards. So it's only a 0.4 yards difference, but it goes to that point of that symbiotic relationship between a 3 tech and a 1 tech, or a space eater and an occupier. That's why I view it in that way, where Edmonds is occupying space. He's forcing people to go to one gap or another gap. He's 2 gapping, and it allows Milano to go run and chase or shoot a gap and penetrate and make a tackle, whatever it is. And it leads to a lower average depth of tackle for Matt Milano. So that's why I think it was perfect segue there to show that relationship between 3 tech, 1 tech, and then how the Bills like to deploy their linebackers. But getting into coverage stats, this is truly outstanding. He is 5th in zone reception percentage at 67.5, 3rd in man reception percentage at 53.3, 7th in passer rating when targeted in zone at 80.3, 18th in passer rating when targeted in man at 87.9. And then get this, he is 1st in coverage EPA in man and zone. He is truly an elite coverage linebacker.
Also, a fun stat just to throw in there. Overall, just coverage in general amongst linebackers with at least 20% of coverage snaps in 2021, of which there were 90. He has the 3rd lowest reception percentage.
He's just outstanding in coverage. Just absolutely outstanding in coverage.
But people tell you he's terrible because he got beat by Travis Kelce that one time.
Yeah, but everyone gets beat by Travis Kelce. So let's just move on past that.
That's why.
There really shouldn't be a lot of discourse going back against Matt Milano. I think people should appreciate Matt Milano for what he is. So we'll move on here to the depth pieces for me. A lot of it is kind of question mark based. Terrell Bernard, obviously, exciting young depth piece with 3-down ability and potential to impact all 3 levels as a blitzer, run defender, and coverage player. But he will likely just be a force on special teams and potentially back up both Mike and Will's spots despite his size. Furthermore, he will likely be that 3rd linebacker in 4-3 personnel if they decide to deploy it this year. We'll see how much they do, how much teams go 12 personnel against them, how much they want to take Teron Johnson off the field, whatever it may be. It'll all be dependent on how good Terrell Bernard is and how much they actually want to get him on the field. So that's going to be an interesting piece to this, but I like his skill set. I like his versatility, but I can't bolster the grade anymore just because I liked what I saw versatility wise from college tape. You kind of need to see more, but then you kind of see that from Terrell Dodson and Andre Smith. Those are kind of the guys where they're the control group for this linebacker grade, where both players are average depth players, sufficient backups, and solid special teams contributors. But I don't know if we're really going to get anything more from them. And they're probably, I don't want to say replacement level guys because they found a home here in Buffalo, but they're close to just above replacement level linebackers where they found a home on special teams and they're sufficient backups here in Buffalo. So that's kind of what controls and rounds out this group and ultimately gets me to 3.3. But the real reason that I got as high as 3.3 is because of Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano.
I think that's very fair. I'm in a similar boat. This is funny from Taylor. Taylor says, why can't Edmonds run with a wide receiver that runs a 4.3 40? I think you meant this as a joke, but what's also funny is He has done that.
I know,
He's
right?
carried Mecole Hardman multiple times in the games against the Chiefs, and on like 25-yard post routes in the middle of the field. Like he can run with those guys. I mean, I'm not saying you want it all the time, but oof, like he can do some things like that. Again, Mecole Hardman's a burner. He doesn't get the speed credit necessarily because he played with Tyreek Hill, but
Right.
they're going to try and use him in that role, and he's got some real speed with that 4.340 ability there. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. You mentioned a lot of the metrics that I had tabbed as well. I think just to really drive it home for me is my grade for them was a 3.4, and I had them as my fourth rated group on the defense. It's carried by Milano and Edmonds. Again, I've said it multiple times. I think so much is asked of them from a responsibility standpoint, like having to play the run and the pass, playing in a nickel defense, playing in a pattern matching style of defense, having to show blitz and then drop out, having to cover the variety of guys they're asked to cover. They have to cover power slots and small slot wide receivers and cover guys coming across on drag routes underneath and on mesh concept, covering tight ends, having to function against maybe this will change a little bit with the changes they made on the interior of the defensive line, but having to two gap and having to take on guards and centers and tackles left and right and all these types of things. So much is asked of them, but I think all things being considered, they both play their positions well. I still think Milano is the better linebacker than Tremaine Edmonds. I still think Edmonds has that ceiling that everybody, thought he had when he came in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be a matter of if he can hit it. Yes, he's still young, yada, yada. I love just where you drilled down on Matt Milano. I think Milano is one of the best off-ball linebackers in football. And I don't know if it's because he's in Buffalo or because he's not too flashy. He's just like super solid at everything. I just don't think he gets the pub and the love from nationally or even from Bills fans. Like there's always someone else to talk about. And that's fine when you've got all pro safeties and an all pro corner and Von Miller and Ed Oliver, and then Tremaine Edmonds is a lightning rod for positive and negative conversations. Matt Milano's just out here just being one of the best coverage linebackers year after year after year, like literally like 4 years in a row.
Yeah,
he's
seriously.
one of the best, no matter how you look at it and slice it, whether you're looking at SIS or PFF, like whatever advanced metric you want to use, he's at the top of the charts for a heavy majority of them. And he's a dog when it comes to playing in the box and playing around the line of scrimmage and fitting the run and blitzing, like you mentioned. So I think they're also very key to this defense. And there's just so much that is heaped upon their shoulders and what is asked of them to play in this defense. But, question here from Taylor. Yes. Taylor says, does the additions to the D-line improve the linebacker grade this year based off of freedom to roam without the offensive line in their laps? It doesn't improve the grade for me in this instance, but I do think their play will be improved because I think they'll have more freedom, both coming forward and sideline to sideline, because they won't have to be constantly like engaging and shedding blocks. I think you'll see more freedom of movement left and right to attack. Again, whether that's horizontally, whether that's coming forward, like I think you'll see more freedom in reading and reacting than you will processing and engaging and then looking and peeking and having to shed and doing all these things just to get to the ball carrier there. As we move on to our fourth position group here, defensive tackle, Kendall, grade, rank, how, and why.
I got interior defensive lineman as my last. They are fifth.
Okay.
Yeah, they made it as fifth, but they are a 3.2. So it's like I said, it's very dense in there. Everyone has fit into a 3 one way or another. But this group is really bolstered by Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver is the reason that it got as high as it did. I like the Daquan Jones signing, but I'll get to that. It's really all based on Ed Oliver and the steps that he took this past year. He is the top end of this group. And the crazy thing is, he still hasn't even reached his ceiling. So, as the season goes, and if we were to revisit this midway through the season, this grade could shoot up based on the type of season that Ed Oliver has if he starts to get even closer to that ceiling. So he started to really find consistency this last season. He had the highest snap share on the defensive line out of all players for the Buffalo Bills last year at 57.8. His metrics were pretty solid. And when you compare them to people that he was drafted near, his peers that people view as just really bona fide studs on the interior, he is better than or tied with a lot of them. So in terms of total pressures, he has 48. in 2021, tied for 12th at the position. That is more than Quinnen Williams, who was drafted, I believe, 3rd overall by the Jets. Right. Another one comparison that's going to take you back a little bit. Then you got in total sacks, he only had 6, right? And I feel like people want more from him, especially his body type and the way he penetrates the line of scrimmage and all that kind of stuff. People expect more than 6, but that's tied for 17th for interior defensive lineman. That's more than Daron Payne, one of those guys from Washington that is just coveted. One of those guys that people really, really like around the league on the interior. And then you move on to pass rush win rate, and he's at 15.3%, which is tied for 9th at the position. That is tied with DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner is a stud, someone who absolutely changed things, like changed the math, changed everything for the Indianapolis Colts and that defensive front. He has been massive for them. So him being in that same vein, especially in pass rush win rate, is a huge, huge, huge feather in the cap. And then you move on to 11th in PRP, which is essentially just PFF's grade to show efficiency in pass rushing. It shows like all of the pressures, but then also relates it to how many opportunities you have to get pressure.
It takes in your pass rush snap count.
It's true efficiency when it comes to, I think a lot of people look at pass rush win rate as efficiency, but this goes down to how much is it affecting the quarterback, not just beating your blocker. This is beating your blocker, but then also getting a pressure or a sack or something like that. So being 11th,
it's relative.
Yeah.
How much did you do with how much you were given?
Exactly. So being 11th is absolutely awesome for someone like Ed Oliver. And we spoke earlier about how sure, I think even, I don't know about you, I don't want to speak for you, but I still feel like he hasn't reached my expectations for where he was drafted. But the kind of season that he put up last year, he's trending towards it. He's surely trending towards it. So that's all encouraging. And then you get towards run stopping stuff. He's 8th in stop percentage at 11.2%. That is better than both Daron Payne and Quinnen Williams. And then you get to average depth of tackle, 6th in average depth of tackle at less than a yard, 0.9 yards. Average depth of tackle. That is better than Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons on the Titans. That is someone that is, absolutely been coveted around the league. And then I'll move on, obviously, to the other guys. Daquan Jones, he's a very solid above average interior defensive lineman, obviously run stopping capabilities. I think we're all very excited to see if that 2 gapping changes things, like the comment said earlier, how that's going to end up impacting the next level with the linebackers. I think it'll be very encouraging to see what that does. His tape was very encouraging, but the main thing with him is he may not have the high end that Harrison Phillips possesses because he's a known commodity. We don't really know where Harrison Phillips' ceiling really ends.
Oh, that's fair.
But you're getting Jones at a fraction of the cost, and you know he has that level of dependability. You know what you're going to get from the guy. He's been relatively healthy recently. He's had really good seasons, especially as a run stopper. So I think that's very valuable, especially considering what the Bills have needed. But then you move on from there, and I think really outside of Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, I don't want to say it's question marks, but I feel like it just got a little bit worse, which is really weird to say considering all the shuffling that the interior defensive line has had in the past like 3 or 4 years. I for whatever reason, I want more, and I think the next 2 guys, Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips, can be an improvement, but I'm kind of wishy-washy. I'm kind of at a tipping point with it. I'm not so sure yet. And the main thing with both of these guys is they're in a 1-tech body, but they play like 3 techs. So I don't know what the deployment strategy will be for them. So Tim Settle, promising young interior defensive lineman with a 3-tech penetrating style of play, but he plays in a 1-tech body. Is he going to play 1-tech? Is he going to play like a 1-tech? Or is he going to play at the 3-tech position? And is he going to penetrate? And is he going to pass rush? Or is he going to truly run stop as a 1-tech? So it's very interesting. He shows pass rush acumen and tenacity and has the traits and ability to be a run stuffer, but can he do it consistently? Because there has been some inconsistency in that regard. And then in terms of Jordan Phillips, it's really very similarly in terms of that body type, but play style thing. But it's more of a known commodity. So I feel a lot more comfortable with that. I'm very encouraged with what Tim Settle is and what the potential of what he can be. It's kind of similar to how I talked about Kyer Elam. I'm happy they took a swing like that.
Mhm.
I think it's an exciting swing, and I think it could work out very favorably, but it still has to work out.
Yeah, you have to see how the pieces fit together. Very fair. Very fair. I was similar in grade. I gave them a 3.5, and they were group number 3 for me. So I had the
Wow.
linebackers. Yeah, I had the linebackers at 3.4. So they were underneath the defensive tackles for me. And defensive tackle was 3. You mentioned a lot of the metrics for Ed Oliver. I wanted to hit some more. So, again, he's leading this group, and I don't think that's any surprise. So again, amongst defensive tackles with at least 20%, just the numbers here are just like kind of wild. Amongst the defensive tackles that had 20% of run defense snaps in the NFL last year, there were 147. So 147 defensive tackles had at least 20% of run defense snaps last year. He was 8th amongst those 147 in stop percentage at 11.2. And he was 18th in total stops. So 18th in total stops. But again, the efficiency piece, he was 8th. He was 6th in average depth of tackle at 0.9. Fun fact, Tim Settle was 7th at 1.0.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And then you mentioned, again, the 9th in run stop win rate. If you want to look at the pass rush perspective, there was 114 defensive tackles with at least 20% of pass rush snaps last year. Tied for 12th in total pressures, 3rd in quarterback hits, 11th in PRP. Like you mentioned, a formula that combines sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times they rush the passer. Tied for 17th in sacks, 7th in pass rush win rate. And he did all of this while having the 5th highest double team rate amongst the top 50 pass rush win rate players. His double team rate is only behind guys like Aaron Donald and several other, high profile interior defensive guys. You add Von Miller, you add Daquan Jones and all these other pieces, his game should raise up in a similar way that Tremaine Edmonds should. Oliver should as well. But Oliver had a crazy good year last year. He's so much better than people realize and people give him credit for. And now you add in Daquan Jones, who has a little more pass rush upside than people give him credit for, but he's that bigger two-gapping physical body type that he knows what his job is, and he's going to be a bully inside to allow other guys to eat. You've got Jordan Phillips, who everybody thinks of as the pass rusher, but in Arizona the last several years, when healthy, he functioned in more of a run-stopping role, kind of clogging up the middle and occupying multiple blockers, but he still has that pass rush pop to him, so you've got that versatility. You've got Tim Settle with, like you mentioned, that tenacity. He's got that motor. He's got the pass rush ability, but he can offer you a little something in the run as well. I like what the Bills' interior is this year versus last year, because I think you have more rock, paper, scissors matchup capability with this group. There's more, this team likes to do this. Well, we have this guy that's good against this. Boom. Oh, next week, this team likes to do that. Cool. We have a different guy than last week who could match up against that. So last week's guy is going to go down here, and this other guy is going to go up here.
That's very fair.
You can counter what a lot of teams are going to try and do. And like Lone Wolf says, hopefully, Daquan Jones will be what we were hoping Star would be. I tell you something about Star too. Star was very good to start the year. And then,
he was.
we know, I don't want to give anybody a pass or make it seem like I'm making excuses. We know there were some things that happened from an off the field perspective, some personal, things for people close to him. I don't think it's any coincidence that his play dipped significantly once that started to happen. He was very good to start the year, both against the run and from a pass rush perspective. He was getting one-on-one opportunities because of all the double teams Ed Oliver was seeing, and he was winning consistently. He was getting pressure at a high clip when he got those opportunities. But to your point, the Bills need that, and we need to see that consistently at that position. Hopefully Daquan Jones can be kind of that calming or stabilizing force there. And so I give this group a 3.5. I wanted to actually go a little higher because I do like it, but I think there are still question marks. How does everybody fit together? I think you have these cool chess pieces and these cool puzzle pieces, but you still got to put them together and put a whole picture together. And what does that look like? And at the very least, I think that Oliver is on borderline, if he isn't already considered a stud. You've got that stud level player, that plus matchup guy, and now you've added all these other mix and match capabilities.
Pieces,
and I like what you do. Again, I'm big into the rock, paper, scissors, shoe, analogy thing. And the additions that the Bills made to the interior of the defensive line give you a lot of mix and match, rock, paper, scissors ability. And then if you pair it with the edge grouping and what they've done now you've got all this opportunity to potentially play some different fronts that they haven't employed previously. And you can line up guys in different techniques up front and play different combinations and, maybe a little more under, or play some tight front, or play more bear, and just do all these different things based on the body types and skill sets and traits that you have. And that's the biggest thing for me, because playoff football is all about matchups. You need to be able to cater to what your team is doing. Like if you're playing a team that is great against the pass, even if you're a great passing team, then it's like, okay, we'll lean into our strength and see if our strength can beat their strength. But what would be awesome is be like, oh, this team is great against the pass, but they're horrible against the run. Cool. We can be good with the run, so we're just going to run the ball. Bill Belichick and the Patriots did that for years. You'd see them come out one game and Brady would pass it 40, 45 times. Then the next week they'd have like 40 runs. And then one week it might be, one running back. And the next week it would be like this week was like a Rex Burkhead week. And the next week was a James White week. And the next week was a Brandon Bolden week. And you were just like, what is going on?
It's truly rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. It's like the old baseball adage. Like sometimes it's not as important of like hitting the ball with, right exit velocity and doing this and that. It's just like, just put the ball where the defense isn't. That's it. That's it. Just hit it where they ain't. That's what the adage is. And I think the Bills are able to hit offenses now where they ain't with what they've done up front defensively. This is a conversation, deeper for another time potentially, but they've got more front variability and opportunity now based on what they've had. They don't have to. And what they've done is already like a proven formula. They've been a very good defense, but now they don't have to necessarily just be like a four down.
That every single time.
They don't have to necessarily just be a 4 down over front. They can mix and experiment with some different things based on what their opponent is going to do and based on who their opponent is, which is why this went up for me a little bit more. And
that makes sense.
Well, I hope so. I didn't want to say it and be like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
No, but it aligns with what you think with the rock, paper, scissors thing, why you graded them higher than I did, because I wasn't necessarily thinking on it on that regard. I was thinking more, just talent based, each guy individually, then how they fit together. And you did that, parts. But then you did some of the parts together, and then the versatility and deployment, and that it makes sense why you inflated the grade relative to mine. That makes a lot of sense.
I appreciate you. Not that your opinion matters to me, because it doesn't.
I'm just a guest.
Yeah, you're just a guest. You mean nothing to me. And now we move on to our last group, who we will differ in terms of our ratings and our ranking. So let's go to the edge grouping here. Kendall, tell me what grade you gave them and where they rank.
So I think if I have my memory correct, they'll be last for you. They are third for me.
Wowzers.
At 3.4. You had IDL at third and linebacker at fourth?
Correct.
Okay, so that's where we differ. It's truly the IDL ranking that changed a lot of this. But anyways, I got them at 3.4, obviously largely bolstered by Von Miller. I mean, most of this grade comes from him. Hall of Fame caliber player. He is bona fide Hall of Famer. Coming off of injury, changing scenery, Miller still put up elite pass rushing stats. Fifth in total pressures with 82. That's more than Myles Garrett had. He's tied for 10th in total sacks with 13th. 8th in pass rush win rate at 20.4%, and then tied for 8th in PRP. We've already mentioned what PRP is. That is truly your efficiency stat. 8th at his age, with everything that happened to him in the last season, recovering off that injury, changing scenery, everything, just fantastic. What he's going to do for this team, how he's going to allow, like you said in the last bit, Ed Oliver to eat, how he's going to free up everyone, and then also potentially change, I don't want to say change the scheme, but change the fronts a little bit. He's going to allow the defense to do different things. So that's the main thing with this grade. It's going to be Von Miller. And then everything else, it's really not a known commodity outside of Shaq Lawson. And I'll get to Shaq Lawson briefly, but really everything else is projection based. So I think the reason I got as high as 3.4 is because of my confidence in Greg Rousseau taking the next step. I think he's the player in this group that I have the second most confidence in moving forward. Obviously, outstanding run defender on the edge with flashes as a pass rusher, but you want to see more than just flashes. You want to see consistency, but you also want to see a plan. You don't want to see him just winning with athleticism and length. You want to see more than that. But in terms of metrics, first in total run stops and stop percentage amongst all edge defenders. That's first. You heard me correct. First amongst everyone, not just rookies. 35 stops at 13.2%. I'm pretty sure second was at like 11.8%.
So
So it's like
he
a
was
full
first in
percentage.
first in total stops and first in stop percentage as a raw, inexperienced rookie.
Yeah, wild. And then you get into pass rushing stuff, and this is actually kind of interesting. He's 50th in total pressures with 36 total pressures. That's 2 less pressures than Mario Addison had on 47 less snaps. So kind of interesting to put that into perspective as someone who is as raw as he was, and then as many opportunities Mario Addison had last year. You only had 2 less pressures. And then you get into pass rush win rate. He was 55th, 13.8. And then he was tied for 45th with Mario Addison and Josh Allen, the pass rusher in PRP. So kind of interesting how, Josh Allen from Jacksonville, like very high regarded talent coming out of Kentucky, still someone who, blew up the game for us against Jacksonville this past year. He's a really talented player, but his PRP was tied for 45th among this group. And that's with Greg Rousseau. So kind of interesting. But Greg Rousseau is the guy that I definitely have the second most confidence in this group. I really do think he's going to take a step in terms of pass rushing. I think a lot of that, it stems from having Von Miller right next to him in the film room, on the practice field, all of that stuff. I do think it's going to trickle down to him. I don't know how much, but I think it will, and I think it will accelerate his development. So I
agree.
I hope I'm right in that regard. So and then the rest of the group is mostly a projection outside of Shaq Lawson, like I mentioned, who's a known commodity. But the grouping of Lawson, Epinesa, and Basham, in my opinion, they all have a floor of average. And then Epinesa and Basham have a slightly above average ceiling, in my opinion. Can they reach it? I don't know. But I think their ceiling is slightly above average. And I feel like if they can reach that, they really just need to prove the consistency. But if they can reach that, then they deserve to be a steady part of this rotation, and they can find a role in this rotation and on this defense. Obviously, this is all projection, like I said, but if they can reach that, I do truly think they can be the third most productive group on this defense. It is all pending all of that projection, that development. But I do think a lot of it is going to accelerate with the presence of Von Miller. I do think they will find more consistency. They will find more technique. They will find all of that stuff, and it will accelerate the development. How much is all within question. That is fair, but I do think it will objectively accelerate.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. I also think that's very, very well said. In terms of talking about what they are and what, their progression can look like, and that acceleration, like Von is like a natural stimulant for that progression and for that execution level and ability. I was close to you. So they were fifth for me, but I was close to you in grade. I gave them a 3.3.
Okay. And truly was a dense grading with this whole defense.
That's what was tough for me, like figuring out what grouping was going to be where and what grading. And what really came down to the grade for me was the pass rush piece and just honestly just the known quantity pieces. The only known quantities that we've got that we know for the edge grouping for the Buffalo Bills is Von Miller as a run stopper and as a pass rusher. He's a known quantity. Other than that, the only other known quantity is Greg Rousseau against the run and Shaq Lawson against the run. Everything else is either a question mark or not that high of a ceiling. I guess we know what Shaq Lawson is from a pass rush standpoint, which is a guy who's like maybe a 4 to 6 sack guy if he falls into some. That's not really his strength. His strength is setting the edge, being physical, being violent on the edge. We don't have a lot of known quantities. Everything, even with Gregory Rousseau, if you think like, hey, I think he takes a jump this year, that's fantastic. It's still projection, because what he showed as a rookie was not a player who had pass rush productivity and a pass rush plan and moves and counters and the ability to set things up and then diagnose later and come back and attack. All things that he talked about this offseason about working towards and wanting to improve. But he's not somebody that right now has it all together as a pass rusher. Now he may.
Yes. And
with what we saw him do against the run as a rookie, maybe he takes a similar jump from a pass rush standpoint and he creeps towards more of that double-digit sack piece. But for me as a pass rusher, he's as much of a projection as Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa. It's just question mark. Now, you might believe in one more than the other, which is completely fine and completely fair. But even if you believe in it, it's still not a known quantity. And that's my question with this grouping and why they were last for me.
Yeah.
I love what Gregory Rousseau did, leading in stops, leading in stop percentage, and the run stop win rate and what he showed on tape. He was like playing gap and a half and 2 gap on his own at different times, being able to come outside and, shut off the outside and forcing a running back to go inside and then shedding the tackle and coming back and making the play and making the tackle himself. Like, he did a really good job as a rookie. But what else do you get? Because you had 2 guys leave in Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. Granted, Von Miller replaces one or both, in theory, depending on how you think how good Von is or how bad Jerry and Addison were. But like you mentioned, with Ed Oliver leading the defensive line in snaps at 57.8%, Jerry Hughes was second, Mario Addison was fourth. And again, they both together accounted for 26% of the Bills' total pressures last year. That's a lot of production that's out the window. And who's going to fill that void? What I think is a funny number, and I like that you mentioned Rousseau's pressures in relation to Mario Addison. AJ Epinesa was 5th on the Bills in pressures in 2021. He had 11 less pressures than Greg Rousseau on 70 less pass rush snaps. And he had only 13 less pressures than Mario Addison on 117 less pass rush snaps. That number is I'm not trying to say anything about any player. This isn't like, read between the lines. I just think that's very interesting that he was 5th relative, again, to, you factor in like he's only 11 less pressures. He's only 11 pressures behind Rousseau on 70 less pass rush snaps, and then 13 behind Addison with 117 less. Maybe there's hope for him in that pass rush piece. He's redone some things this offseason. He seems to be really benefiting from that Von Miller teaching and tutelage. And that's also part of that wild card or variability you got going on here too, right? Like, what impact does Von Miller have from the mental side and the preparation side for Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Basham and maybe even on Shaq? But the main thing with me with this grouping, I feel like I'm harder on this group than a lot of people have been this offseason. I just think there's still a lot of question marks and variability. And even where I'm high on guys, it's still based on projection. It's still you evaluating and think, well, I think this guy can do this. Like, because and this isn't a negative, like there's no proof for you to sit there and be like, I think Greg Rousseau is going to, crush it as a pass rusher this year. That's just what you think. You can't point and be like, well, the reason is because X, Y, and Z, and here's the facts and here's the tape. Because whether you look at the metrics or, again, the film don't lie, right? You saw a guy last year who won with his physical ability when he did win, but you did not see a player. And again, this isn't a knock. He was very green. He doesn't have that technical piece yet. You saw a guy who did not have the moves and the plan ready to be a consistent pass rusher in the NFL. Also something to consider. We got a really good question on Twitter earlier today in the DMs. And the question was related to, if the Bills want to rush 4, but with non-traditional personnel, which defensive end do they drop into coverage? The follow-up was really about, I know that Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes really dropped last year. So, the person who asked this question wanted to know what does that look like this year? Like, who drops and does stuff like that. So what I found was very interesting. So Jerry Hughes last year, he had 20 coverage snaps. Mario Addison had 25. That was tops for the defensive line. We know the Bills like to bring those simulated pressures where they rush 4, but they, drop one out. I appreciate the super chat. You're fantastic. Thank you very much for the super chat, Dad of a Bills fan. Thank you for being here this entire episode. I love the thought-provoking comments, the engagement, everything. You were great. The tree will be, you said it's Friday starts 4th of July weekend. Today is Wednesday. Therefore, 4th of July weekend has not started. We're still very much in June. You will see next week, but I appreciate you holding me to it. And thank you so much for the super chat. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Von Miller last year had 69 coverage snaps, which was 13th amongst all edges. That includes the edges who play more coverage, like guys like Tyus Bowser for Baltimore, who had like 200 something. Von Miller is a guy who's very comfortable dropping into coverage. Gregory Rousseau, with his athleticism and his length, is somebody that I think they drop in as well. And so to answer that question, I think when we see those simulated pressures and we see the Bills bring 4 and they're dropping, 1 or 2 guys off of the line of scrimmage, like traditional line of scrimmage guys, I think it's going to be Vaughn. I think it's going to be Gregory Rousseau based on what we've seen before. Von Miller's very comfortable as an athlete, just like in space, dropping into coverage. Like we've seen him do that in Denver. We saw him do it with the Rams. And I think that gets lost. A lot of people just think like, no, he should be going forward. He's a good athlete. He understands spacing. He understands leverage. I think you will see, to answer that question and looking at it from that perspective, when you're looking at those pressures and which defensive end do they drop, I think you're going to look into Vaughn as number 1, Rousseau as number 2, and then AJ Epinesa as that third. Maybe some Basham, depending on how light on his feet he is with all this weight loss that he did this year. But yeah, I think that's what you'll get for there. I wanted to answer that question. I think that is going to do it for us on this jam-packed, action-packed episode. There's a lot of talking points when it gets down to the nitty-gritty and the detail work. You're really splitting hairs and you have to explain and elaborate. And I couldn't have had a better guest from the team to do this episode with me. So thank you. Yeah, no, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about dad of a Bills fan.
Of course you were. I mean, he's giving you money.
Super chat donation in relation to the tree. Thank you very much, Maz, for the super chat and his donation to keep the tree up. I will make sure these proceeds go towards, improving that tree. Appreciate you guys. These are all tree proceeds at this point. Thank you very much. But Kendall, no, seriously, thank you. I had a blast doing this episode. You crushed it as always. For everybody who joined us live, thank you very much for joining us live here on this episode. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for the engagement, the questions, the comments, the concerns, the back and forth. It wasn't just comments just for the sake of making comments. Really appreciate, you guys engaging with us and engaging with each other. It makes it, all the more interactive and the better for us. And it makes the show much more enjoyable. While you're still here, please drop a like on this video. If you did not watch this live and you're watching later, thank you very much for your view. If you're listening to this episode of Disguise Coverage, thank you very much for your listen, your download, whatever have you. And regardless of where you are, YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please drop a like. Please drop a rating or a review. Please subscribe to Disguise Coverage no matter where you are listening or watching. All of those things, the subscriptions, the ratings, the reviews, the likes. I know it's corny, but they go a tremendously long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If there was something that you wanted us to answer that we didn't get to in this episode, get at us on Twitter. I'm at pro2_ANT. Kendall is at Mersky Kendall. You guys can see it right there on the screen. Follow us on Twitter, add us on Twitter, DM us, whatever you need. We are men of the people, and we'd like to help you as much as possible. Thank you for any and every ounce of support you contributed to this show. If you like this show, tell all your family and friends and loved ones about it. If you hated the show and thought it was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day. We appreciate you guys more than you possibly know. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Take care of one another. We will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.